Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to the Dev Talk Show, another morning edition here on June 26th of 2023. Here on the East Coast, it's a little before 8, so good morning, Rich.
Hey, nice way to start a Monday morning. Morning, Chris.
Yep. Oops, hold on a
Awesome.
second. I think I had a little bit of, some folks might have heard a little bit of feedback from my own machine there. I don't know if that came through, but that should be cured.
Cool.
So anyways, here we are this morning. The show topic, whether you're watching live on Twitch or on YouTube right now, is the Azure Developer CLI. And I feel like in the distant past, maybe not too distant, I think there is a Dev Talk Show episode when this was a brand new thing, early previews. I think it's back there, maybe over a year, maybe.
And that's that. We should go take a look because I know we talked about doing it, and then I remember also that being around the time where things got crazy busy for everybody.
Yes,
and like I think it was lined up as a topic, and I was like, we can't do a show tonight. It was one of those. I believe it was one of those kind of things.
Let's see. All right, Azure Developer. Oh, it's not quite coming up. You know what I wonder is? I wonder if it was buried as part of another topic. Like we might have talked to it, spoke of it a little bit in a different topic. Yeah, maybe as part of the Azure API management or something else. I don't know. But hey, here's the thing. This is the key. This is the news. The news is that it's generally available, right? And that was just recently announced.
Exactly. That was one of the great announcements that came out of Build, is that while I've certainly been playing around with it while it was in beta, and it was pretty awesome, it is a G8 amount of awesomeness, essentially, that you can go ahead and start using for your products. I think they even, if I'm not mistaken, I think they even bumped the version number up to 1.0 just to kind of support that. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because before it was like
0.3 or something.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I just picked a random spot in the documentation. It's really not that random. It is the overview. What is the Azure Developer CLI? And so for folks like us who I think we did several shows where or maybe all of us used AZ, the Azure CLI.
Yep.
I think I've used it. I have definitely spoken highly of it on this show. I think even I don't know if I was able to demonstrate this. Maybe I was, but I think even when we did Oh My Posh, I used the Azure little segment in order to know which Azure subscription I was logged into, which sounds like some kind of weird first world problem, but it gets really important sometimes at work when you have multiple Azure subscriptions. And so we know about AZ. And in fact, it's even gotten to the point where it's kind of like a verb for me, like, oh, okay, I'm going to use AZ for this or that, or some light bash scripting maybe to script a workflow. But here in this case, and I'm going to highlight it on the screen very quickly, we have a new friend, AZD. And there it is, the Azure Developer CLI, an open source tool that accelerates the time it takes for you and your application from local development environment to Azure.
Yes.
So I'm going to let that be the Wikipedia style answer, or maybe the Jeopardy style answer. It's an open source tool that accelerates the time it takes for you to get your application from local development environment to Azure. And then I'll buzz in and say to you, what is the Azure Developer CLI?
Exactly. And someday that may be the ChatGPT answer as well. So
yeah.
No, and that's kind of, and that's kind of how I think about it. I also think about it a little bit like, I'm trying to do, we always talk about what's that file new project, as a developer. And to some extent, this can be the latest, because there's been a number of ways of saying file new project in Azure, where that started a DevOps project for you at one point, right? And you were able to go ahead and determine, what kind of, application you're putting and what kind of language and stuff like that, going into Azure DevOps. And this is kind of the mature version of all of that, because it really gives you the flexibility not just to come in and deploy an application, but deploy your application and whatever you're using because of some of the things that are inside of here. So yeah, why don't we Why don't we take a look?
Okay.
I think you can see my screen, right?
Yep. If you're ready, I'm switching over, and there it is.
And I'm going to
There it is.
ridiculously zoom in. Hopefully this looks good
Ludicrous
here.
zoom in.
Yeah. At some point there has to be some kind of a presentation mode where I can get a desktop where all of those settings are just kind of there. Which I may be working on soon. But so when you do AZD, this is just a way of, we have that overarching statement that Chris showed on the website, but this is, some of the features and functions that are available inside of this set of commands. And I remember when I first saw somebody type AZD instead of AZ, and they're like, okay, what is that? Why are they going down that path? And, with the components here, the idea is I've either got an application on my machine and then want a way to get it into Azure. And that's not just right click deploy, because we all know we can certainly do that in either in Visual Studio or using the plugins in Visual Studio Code. But this gives a bit more structure around what it is you're actually deploying and where you're actually deploying that. So what probably the best way to do this is just to kind of run through and show some of the pieces. So in this case, I'm going to do well, let's before we show that, let's one thing I want to look for is
Well, to your point, like you said,
yep.
AZD seems to be the entry point. So that's similar to AZ. If you're a .NET developer, you may already be kind of used to this command line workflow with .NET, DOT,
Yep.
and various. I mean, command line tools are. I guess it's fair to say that in the last, I don't know, several years, they've made a huge comeback.
Definitely. There's a lot more living in the command line now.
Yeah, whereas there's a GitHub CLI now. Many developers probably, it could be that for a lot of developers who maybe have lived the whole cycle of we only had command line and we loved it, and then GUIs were just rule the day, including IDEs and everything, and then in the web, you'd go to the web to do something. We kind of came back with Git. Like Git was like, all right, somebody finally sat you down and said, like, you'd better learn Git command line, Shani. And so you just did. But it's back. It's back in full force. And I like something you said early that I'm latching onto. It, among other things, it can be the file new project for your Azure development, which is key. I still think many of us with a legacy of Visual Studio based development, Visual Studio goes back to 97 now. 1997 right. Have got it's even like an adjective. Here's or a noun or I don't know. Here's the file new project for that thing, and we get very passionate about what that workflow looks like. What does the file new project look like? Here we're saying, let's forget about the tools. Let's forget about the IDE. What if this was it? So yeah, I can't wait to see you initialize some things here.
Yeah, definitely. And before we initialize them, what I want to show is there is a list of templates available. Now, these are the standard set of templates that are part of the tooling. There is, and we'll see in a little bit, there's a website that has a whole host of additional templates that go beyond this. But this is when you were playing around with the beta and kind of what we're GA'd with what's in the product here. Out of the box, these are the easy ones where I can pull them up and I can say, well, these repos give me the ability to quickly launch or quickly get an application on my local machine. And we could do something in React with C# or React with Node or React with Python. So coming from whatever developer background tooling set you have, it's a way to, get started with an application that meets what it is you're working on. And then, because as you see in a minute when we initialize it, of all the other ceremony that's included in there, you've got the structure to go ahead and then deploy that to Azure, or deploy it to your developer tool chain, as it were. So there's even a way to go ahead and put these into containers as well. And we'll see that in a bit when we look at the initialization. So I don't know, do you have a favorite here, or one you want to pull in as a way to get started? Just to kind of show the structure. I don't know that we'll go into and start mucking with code here.
No, right. Well, how about this C# Cosmos SQL one, which it says here, React web app with C# API and MongoDB is what it says.
Yes. So the Mongo front end. Oh, okay. Yeah. You're looking at the.
Sorry, I was looking at the names of the templates, and then
there we go.
because I figured, hey, that's a little unique. And I could see myself, like if I was doing exactly what you're doing, but except that I have no idea what's going on still,
Yep.
I might say, well, I've done the whole React with an API and a SQL database. Let's see what they're talking about here with something I'm less familiar with. Just, so that's where I'm at. Let's see it.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll do AZD, we'll do init. And I should just be able to make sure I should just be able to put the template in, right? Location environment string, yep, template. So AZD init, and then it's to do C# Cosmos SQL. Awesome. Oop. All right. Oh, because I'm trying to install it on the C drive, so we're gonna break out of that. Let's see. Let's do this. I don't think we have one of these. Let's make the TD. So we'll put our own directory here for where we're going to go ahead and put these. Inside of this directory, we'll run that same command. So azd init to do C# Cosmo. Yep, that's the one. All right. Boom. All right. So it's downloaded the Git repository. It's downloaded the template. For this, what we're going to do is it wants an environment name. And that's because of the, what environment are we deploying it to? In this case, we'll just call it a development environment. So it takes our file name and drops a dev at the end of it. That's fine. And our new project is initialized, which is awesome. So we can look at this and we can see, well, here we go. We've got our essentially our application here. And if we look at it, it's created a bunch of folders. It's created an AZDO, or a folder for Azure DevOps. I've got a folder here for Azure. We've got our friend here that we've talked about this one many times before, our dev container folder. That gives us the ability, it has the specifications in it. So for applications that understand how to take everything you see here and move it into container and work inside of that container, we've got the capability to do that. So something like Visual Studio Code, or using something like Code Spaces, we can take those components and be able to run everything inside of there. It's got a line for GitHub, our Visual Studio Code components, and then assets, which we'll take a look at those, infrastructure components, which are how do we go ahead and create things in Azure. We'll see those in a second. And then our source file, as well as some tests here, right? So having, essentially all the things you're going to need to get the application up and running and through any kind of pipeline you might have as a developer. So all of those things get created just by doing azd init. What it did, though, is it took that project, that to-do app, and dropped all that source code inside of that source code folder. So if we take all of this and essentially open this up in Visual Studio Code,
all right,
we've got that structure here. That's good size?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to install the record for? Sure, let's install this.
Oh, gosh. Cool.
So this is actually a plugin for Azure Developer CLI, which I didn't have in this version of Visual Studio Code. So it's going to go ahead and push that in there for me. So this is good. So that's there. That's up and running. All right, so back and look at the code. You'll see inside of here, we've got two projects, an API project, which is, essentially as you can imagine, that's going to go ahead and do our data layer for us. And then our web component, which is our, the web front end part of our application.
Yep.
So that kind of makes sense. That kind of lives where it needs to live. But if we look at some of the other pieces, let's look at the infrastructure piece here. So what it's done is it's actually created or what was part of the template is a bicep file. And if you're not aware, bicep is a domain specific language around creating your Azure infrastructure. It ultimately converts down to an ARM template or an Azure Resource Manager template, which is how Azure understands what it is it needs to put in place. But by um, by abstracting that a little bit in this bicep file, it makes it a little bit easier for us to essentially create and to put that to put that infrastructure piece together. So this will, based on the project that's here and the template that they created for us, will give us everything we need in Azure to create an app service and to go ahead and actually create the actual application itself, and be able to deploy that up into Azure. And to do that, to actually do that application, uh, they make it very easy. So once you have your project here, you might make any code changes you have, or go ahead and put those pieces in place. I could go ahead inside of here and do ACD provision. And what that would do is actually run this bicep file and all the components with it in my Azure subscription and create that environment for me there. I could also do something called AZD up, which will not only it does the provisioning, but it also does the deployment. So it will take my Azure infrastructure and create it, but then once it's created, move my code into that infrastructure that it just created for me in that subscription. So, and then to reverse the whole process, you could just do ACD down and bring everything back down again. So, think of, I'm just trying this out. I want to test something, and I can bring it up and bring it back down and redo as I need to my environment if I need to make changes. So we kind of said a lot there. I'm sure you got some questions. Go ahead.
No, so that was cool. Like, there was a difference between provisioning the infrastructure and deploying the app. And there's two commands. Like, if you just want to provision the infrastructure, fine. If you want to go ahead and deploy the app, including your code, there was up. I don't know if there's, or if it even matters if you just keep reusing up. If you just say like, hey, I've done a little bit more work, I want to provision that. I've done a little bit more work. I don't know if that matters. I don't know if like Bicep takes care of that.
Yes. So Bicep would, it depends how that would be interesting. So yes, Bicep would handle the differential and be able to push, as it creates the ARM template. Usually it's a create or update kind of scenario. Now, if those artifacts already exist and you create a new one with a different name, it's not going to go ahead and delete the old one, right? So if I create an an app service plan and I realize I don't want to, I want to change some of the specs, I want to change the name of it, whatever, I got to go ahead and read. That'll give me a second one up there, basically. But and that's why going through the, bring it back, bring the infrastructure down, and then go ahead and recreate it, because you're going to want to be confident that what you have in your Bicep in your infrastructure folder is repeatable across your other environments when you go ahead and do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think, as I try to think about where the boundaries are for a tool, I'm not going to say that here on the show or even today we're going to like lay down exactly what they are, because I think for each of us they might be different. And certainly there's a lot of great use cases I'm seeing here. One of them is just, hey, I think I want to try this template. We talked about the templates that come in the box, and that list, like if you look at that list, you might say like, oh gosh, that's kind of a small list. My template isn't there, but I think we're going to cover that a little bit later. But it could be a way for me to experiment with something I've never tried before, which in my case would be the MongoDB Cosmos interface. So at least I don't think I've really tried it seriously. So here's a way to just get that stuff up. I might now inspect what it's done. I might look to this to be like an idea starter, or I might look to this to be like, hey, I'm just going to start building on this. I don't know if what I just said is necessarily the best workflow in terms of, I'm going to do AZD up, sorry. And then I'm going to do a little bit of work and do that again, and do a little work and do that again. I think that what'll happen, I'd like to believe that what'll happen pretty quickly is you will say, hold on, I need a different deployment workflow, which might be based on GitHub Actions and based more to my my commit. So I've committed, it's on a branch that I have GitHub Actions paying attention to, and boom, there it goes out to a development environment, whatever.
Yeah.
Not to mention that what if at the same time the workflow of I'm still on my local host workflow, everything's here on my box, and that's not going to be using AZD up anyway. That's run it locally.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting. Okay.
I think part of it is what part of the, if you think about the entire life cycle, if you will, of what a developer does, right? Some of that is focused on code, and maybe
Yes.
it's the developer, depending on the size of the team, maybe it's the IT team, whoever it might be. Somebody's focused on that infrastructure folder.
Right.
And the fact that we've got infrastructure as code, or
Yeah.
IAC, in your project here, there is a developer pipeline for that infrastructure as code person. So doing that, hey, let's create the bicep. Okay, I think it's what we want. All right, real quick, AZD up. Throw it to my sandbox. What does it look like? Did it give me everything I need? Can I deploy my application there? How good do I feel that this will work for all the other environments? And then you might get in that process where it's AZD up. Did it work? AZD down. This way, it's all here, and I'm not worried about checking code into somewhere else just to see how it was. It's almost like that F5 debugging, of my application locally that you typically do, except
Yeah.
that because of where I need to work, I've got to push things into an Azure sandbox so that I can see how it works.
Yeah. That's an interesting point too. Many of us who are watching or have experienced this, if your organization has like maybe a DevOps workflow, and sometimes that could involve editing. I mean, there's one way. It could just be involved editing YAML files. And this could be whether you're using, it doesn't matter what you're using, frankly. It could be Azure DevOps pipelines. It could be GitHub Actions. It could be whatever. How many times have you seen the branch that has YAML check-in after YAML check-in because you're testing this in your cloud deployment?
Right.
And it starts to get to where the commits are like, tried a thing, tried again, tried another time. And this is a different show where I talk about squashing those commits.
Yeah.
But in any case, so we have Sarah Dukevich joining us.
Hey, Sarah.
Saduki. She was on the show with us once, and she says good morning. So really awesome to see you. Everybody should be following Saduki. I've seen posts on LinkedIn, on Twitter, always sharing the knowledge. I don't know if I've ever met anyone who is more excited and exciting about teaching what she has learned to other developers.
Yeah.
And I think that she takes the time from when like I just learned it to I'm teaching other people, and dramatically shortens it into time intervals that I can't even conceive of,
Right.
Fantastic. Everybody, please, if you're ever at a conference or something, go see what Saduki's talking about, because it is always fun and always with a smile. One of my favorite people in our community. So, but yes, but absolutely. I love this. YAML check-ins, please work maybe this time, and devolves into not today YAML.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like a whole different show, which I'm going to evangelize, like, oh gosh, please squash that into a meaningful commit that tells you what you actually accomplished. But we've all seen it. So in any case, I guess I put us on a tangent enough of like work of without even getting to see the thing work.
Yeah.
Of like, oh my gosh, how am I going to use this tool? Which is probably a weakness of mine, where I'm trying to think of what's the fence around how I use it. But
Sure.
AZD, we used a template. We got a new project. And interesting, we also got Bicep with it, which I'm not. I feel like I don't remember that in our preview look at it. I could be wrong. We'll have to go find that show in the archives.
Yeah.
And I also was just reading in the documentation as we were talking here that AZD install also installs the GitHub CLI and the Bicep CLI. So,
yes.
and then if you go uninstall AZD, then they remove those for you, which is very nice of them. I appreciate that. But that's interesting. Now there's another CLI that I haven't taken much of a look at, the Bicep CLI. But yeah, okay. So we've got quite a bit going here. The dev container folder is there. Visual Studio Code was asking you if you wanted to install the dev container, yeah, it was the dev container extension, right? So
Yeah,
that
because
you
they
can just,
renamed that one.
yeah. So
Since we last talked about it. Yeah.
if you are like ready to go with Docker on your machine, no matter what operating system you're on,
Mm-hmm.
you're ready to go here with local Dockerized development. Boom.
Yeah. Yeah. If you wanted to do that Python starter template, right? How many, you know, not everybody has, I'm a .NET developer, so I don't typically have Python on my machine. So having that running inside of that container would be the ideal way for me to kick that off and make that run. So yeah, having, if you have, like Chris said, if you have Docker, you can pretty much run inside a container and then have the ability to take it across whatever language you have that you might need to jump into. One thing I do want to mention, since I probably should have started here as well, there is a easy way to get this application onto your machine.
Oh,
So if
that's
you,
right. How to install.
yes, so if you search for Azure Developer on Winget, and Winget
Okay.
is the Windows package manager, you can see right there that we've got a version, and actually that version is more recent than the one I have. I think I'm running 1.0.200 as opposed to the 1.0.300. But you can always update it, right? You can do a winget upgrade, and then in this case they call it Microsoft.azd. I'm not going to do that right now. Just think,
Yeah.
it depends how dangerously we want to live this morning on this one. So we're gonna let that go. But that's how you would go ahead and do it there. So I'm gonna close that window back down. I got in trouble last week when we did this, and I forget how to.
Oh, that's right. You were trying to just get rid of this one
Yeah.
window, and because look at you, you're like a power Windows terminal user now, opening Windows to the side. This has become a really popular topic too, of people using their favorite command line interface, whether it's a Linux terminal or here with Windows terminal, and just starting to have like multiple command line windows that they're working in. It almost starts to look like an IDE. One of them's got code,
Mm-hmm.
another one's got the directory structure. I have not really dove into that, and it might be interesting too. But hey, so we were just talking about installing. If you are watching on YouTube, whether now or in the future, the show notes down below do have a link to the how
Oh,
to
nice.
install web page. We've got a couple links in there, and then even as Rich is talking here, I'll try to update those show notes as we talk. And if you just want to wait until the show's over and hit refresh, then you'll see them, and that'll be great.
So what I did was I just so power user tip: if you hold the Alt key down and hit that button, that's where we get the other window popping up to the side. What I did was, to get out of it, I just hit exit, or just typed in exit.
Oh, okay, yeah, and there goes the window. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, and then I'm not totally
That was almost
clobbering the whole
that was
screen.
almost too obvious. Like I would have never thought of it. I would have never thought of it until you said it. I would have been thinking, what's the shortcut key to make a window go away? And it's like, oh, well, maybe it's command line. Just exit.
Yeah. So especially because that it gives you the tab up there with a little X on it. You figure, well, I'm only closing that window, right? Anyway, so jumping back over to our Visual Studio Code instance, we have the main bicep file here, and then all of the supporting infrastructure components that it needs to call into, to all the modules essentially. So you see we have here a module, and it references the app web bicep. If you go app web bicep, this is the module that winds up being called. So this is some of the things that we can do a whole show on. I know we have done a whole show on bicep, but it gives you the ability to really segment out and modularize your code when it comes to the infrastructure side of things. There's also a Terraform instance, so you could start with Terraform if that's your infrastructure as code language of choice, and use that to create your Azure instance or your Azure components as well. One of the things I want to talk about here is this Azure folder. And then underneath here, you'll see this name here, the dev tdts-dev. If you remember when we created the project, it asked us for an environment name. So essentially what this is a way of grouping environment variables and grouping configuration variables for that particular environment. So if we wanted to have a sandbox, have a dev, have even a tester or prod, because that's kind of where we are. When it comes to deploying these, we could create those different environments here and assign whatever variables we need to get passed into those when they run and get moved up into Azure. So in this case here, this is an environment specific set of configurations, and then there's a configuration file at the Azure level itself. In this case, talking about the version that we have and what our default environment is if we had multiples. So that's an important piece of the picture. The other important piece when we think about the Azure AZD CLI is this Azure YAML file. And this helps to describe the components that are going to get deployed into Azure. So you see here we've got number of services that we're going to create. In this case, we've got a web service and where that project specifically is located. We've got an API service and where that project is located. And what's important here is what's the language related to those, because if you're coming into Azure, you're probably aware, but may not be, that you have the ability to bring whatever language you're working on for the most part for your application. And there's a service in Azure where that can run. So our app services support not only C#, as you can imagine, but also Node, Python, PHP, Ruby, Java. You just basically write the language and you want, but then as we're creating up the service and we start to stand that service up, Bicep says, give us the infrastructure to create an app service plan, the virtual machine, and then the app service, the actual website running inside of that app service. Nowhere in there do we have the way to specify the language as part of that as part of that code getting deployed there. That's what this file helps us to define. So while we can stand up an app service, we can, as part of, if you were to do this through the portal and configure it, you would have that as a selector inside of there. And all we're doing is basically making those choices here inside of this Azure YAML.
Okay, cool. And then, so definitely, following along there, here we are spinning up an Azure app service based application. And okay, you were saying we can pick the language here, but what I missed, or at least ran by, was there were scenarios where you don't get to choose that. And was that the AZ command line or just something else?
More so on the Bicep side, as far as the properties and the parameters that you can provide, there's no way here, because you're just basically standing up the service.
Okay.
You're not moving your code or giving it any information about your code. So that's the distinction there. So that's why there's this other file here that helps define that.
Okay, fair enough. And like Suzuki says, used with PHP, Python, Ruby, C#. I've definitely deployed some C# and Python myself. I'm trying to think if I've done anything else. Node. And in fact, in the very early days of Azure App Service, the earliest days, I used to have a workflow that I would give to the youngsters in codeathons where they would deploy an app service just for their static websites. And it was using Kudu, which would automatically stand up the site after it kind of detected what your site was. Now I think I've switched them over to GitHub Pages at this point, where like they just commit the code and it's a website. But it was something that was very nice to have. And so app service is awesome. It just really, I don't know, how do we even go into it in 10 seconds?
Right. So. It literally is take the code, take the web application code that you're working on and bring it into an app service, and it will run. If it needs a Windows infrastructure, you can certainly have that app service running on a Windows app service plan. But for the most part, especially as we start talking about things like Node and Python and C# with .NET Core, it can run, natively in a Linux machine, and that becomes much more, or that becomes less expensive from a cost perspective. So
Yeah. So the only thing that I noticed there, like as you were talking about AZD up, or you're talking about the environments,
yeah.
is you had that config.json that was sort of like, hey, if you don't specify, I will, I guess.
Hmm.
And when you use AZD up or provision or deploy, if you don't specify the environment string with a dash e, then it's saying we're going to use dev dtts dash dev. And so the template had you create a default.
Yes.
And now what you're doing is you are saying, okay, let's just say I'm working on this now. The
Hmm.
default came in. I might add side by side, I might add a prod, and all I'd have to do is just copy that folder, I guess, make another folder. Is there anything else that I got to put in there to say that, yeah, I'm going to be dev td? Ah, boy, what a easy for me to say. You picked a tongue twister for an environment name. Dev tdts dot dash prod. Like, do I have to? Is it best to do what you're about to do? This isn't a copy and paste thing, or maybe it doesn't matter,
You said
or we're
copy and
gonna
paste
find out.
certainly. Copy and paste certainly works. We've learned that enough, right? But as with any copy and paste, you have the potential to get yourself in a little bit of trouble, depending on what you copy and paste. So we could certainly do something like AZD environment new and give a new environment name, and we could do dev
Okay.
td edts sandbox.
Okay. And it's gonna go ahead and do that.
So now if we go
So
back, yeah. So now we've
yeah,
got
look
our
at that. Okay.
sandbox instance there.
And it's kind of the same. So yeah, we have a hi. So good morning to Greenish Pepper, who I'm pretty sure we met. I met in C# Fritz's stream.
Oh, cool.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. That's pretty sure where we met. And obviously our friend Jeff Fritz, who just the other day was doing a full day workshop on
Oh
web
yeah.
development with Blazor. I mean, and I remember checking in multiple times during the day because, unfortunately, I had to work, but I check in multiple times and he's moving along the Blazing Pizza app, but with a lot of his own additions and commentary and the way only Jeff can do to basically say, here are my tips,
Oh,
and
nice.
this is how. So it wasn't just like, let's walk through the Blazing Pizza workshop app. He had forked it and done some customizations, I think, to kind of illustrate, to really highlight what he wanted to show. And it was just fantastic. It just kept all day long. I mean, he's really amazing. So
I will
thank
have
you
to.
for joining us. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to go back and check that out because I went through. We have if you go to learn.microsoft.com, there is a lab that takes you through how to create your first Blazor app, and it's using the Blazing Pizza.
Yep.
So it'd be nice to see. All right, I've gone through that. Let's take a look at what Jeff did. That goes that next step up, right?
Yep. Yep. And so, the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times on this show, we very quickly will start with something like we did right away, and then very quickly start like chatting about how we'll use it or whatever. And then I think the wrinkle is, all right, let's try something that no one's prepared. And so I just put Rich on the spot here and said, how do I make another environment? Do I just cut and paste the folder? And I'm not sure that you knew. And we're very much like, I don't know, let's find out. And that's
Right.
definitely the live part of the Dev Talk Show. Is we might come in with a 20% preparation and we know the 80% is going to be an audience member asked us how to do this. Let's try it.
What
and,
could go wrong?
and sometimes it works and we celebrate and we go, yes, awesome. And then other times you say, we couldn't figure it out today. Maybe we'll have a future show where we show you what we learned. So, great question here. Greenish Pepper, I have to go back and watch Jeff's stream. Wasn't able to watch all of it, neither was I. Are both of you working at Microsoft? So, always a good time.
Yeah.
I am not. I am a Microsoft MVP and have been for several years now. I don't know, 5, 6, something like that, which a Microsoft MVP just means that I, number one, don't work for Microsoft. And number two, try to spend time in the community, helping people, offering, advice, experience, and also just listening to people. And then when I do get opportunities, maybe to talk to folks who work at Microsoft, I'll tell them, here's what I'm hearing in the community. Here's what developers are happy about, frustrated about. Producing content like this is often associated with being a Microsoft MVP, but it doesn't have to be content based. You could be a heavy contributor to the .NET repo, ASP.NET open source projects, whether they're official Microsoft projects or just contributor projects in the open source community. And that's another, there's many ways that people get recognized. But that's just me not working for Microsoft. Rich.
Yeah. I do work for Microsoft. I am what's called a cross solution architect. I'm part of the Microsoft Technology Centers. There's about 15 of us across the US, 40 of us around the world. And it's a place where customers come and have deep technical conversations around, for me, my specific area around app innovation, but we can certainly talk to customers around any of the Microsoft solutions. I've got a set of colleagues here who can go deep on any one of those things that we have, whether it's modern work or security or data and AI, as is pretty popular right now, or biz apps and power apps. So yeah, so it's this, and much like Chris was saying with the MVP side, doing this isn't something that's required of what we do at what I do at Microsoft, but it is something that I certainly have a lot of fun in jumping on and seeing, showing what's new, talking about what's new, and getting questions from folks who are watching, which is awesome. So thank you for that community cover.
So what else in the time we have left here? I think we were talking originally about templates.
Yeah.
And so I made the comment that there weren't that many in the box, which wasn't meant to make people, I mean, that's a lead in.
It is.
Oh, okay, cool. I got to make sure I get this here. It's awesome AZD. I'm going to get this into the show notes here.
Yep. And this is a site up on GitHub that host this information. This, I understand, there is I'll get you the link for this too, Chris, in the Azure, I think it's in the Azure Developers channel on YouTube. There is a monthly cadence that the Azure Developer CLI team does, just to kind of talk about, hey, this is our roadmap, this is what we're working on, here's some community things that are happening, here's some new things we release, because they're always updating and pushing things out there. So there's definitely a channel to go look at for that if you're interested in what the AZD team is doing. But one of the things they mentioned this past month is that this site is going to get a bit of an upgrade and a bit of a change up in the in what it looks like. So oh, cool. And there's that, and yep. Sudoku has a AKA link there, which is great.
So awesome AZD. What is this about?
So this is, we saw that list of templates that comes in the CLI tooling. This is a number of community contribute templates that people have started to put into play here. So you can scroll through this. So here's we did have the containerized apps when we were looking at it, but here's a scalable Django on Azure App Service, right? Here's an SAP Cloud SDK Azure App Service Quick Start using TypeScript as the language of choice there, which ultimately becomes a Node.js application, I would think. All of these are essentially here, and then these are community submitted. So you can use this to kind of scroll through and pick what you're looking for. There's the slicer up top, or the filter up top, if we wanted to look for something that was Terraform or MongoDB focused. Here's a list of all of those templates that are there. If I wanted to uncheck that and search for something like this and say Blazor, there's none.
That's odd.
Wow, that is odd. We might have to do something about that. So, but you get the idea that there is, even, let's see what's in their OpenAI service. So they even have some of the templates here that let you start to communicate with or include in your infrastructure or your architecture if you need it. Our Azure OpenAI service that provides that chat functionality and the AI capabilities into your applications. So there's a number of different architectures here. So as we click into those, let's look at this one here. It's a simple chat application. I'm going to open up in a new tab. And that'll take you out to the GitHub repo, right? So there's some things in this GitHub repo where it is, kind of bound back to the other site so that they know that it's a template, and they can it has all the information here essentially for you to, in this case, build your own ChatGPT application.
Huh. Okay. Cool. Let's see. So yeah, what do you think about, again, one of the ways I looked at the AZD templates is I said, the first thing that popped in my head is I just kind of want to see how connecting to a MongoDB Cosmos instance would work.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what it would be like to just come through here and say, I don't know much about the OpenAI service. I'm just going to click what you did, pick a
Yeah.
template, and maybe that'll be an entree into learning. I mean, documentation is great. It certainly is a good way to start learning anything. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes as a developer, can you just put some code in front of me that runs and then I'll start looking at it?
Yes.
I don't know if it's the best way to learn, but it's definitely a way to learn, and in a way that I often do. I often just some running code, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll look at what it does, and then I'll play with it and break it on purpose just to see, like, okay, that was important. Don't touch that. Yeah.
So if we go back to here, right, and kind of tie the two pieces together, we saw, initially we did an Azure AD init, and that got our project from the templates there. But if template's not in the list, what do we do, right? So here we essentially can go ahead and include the template switch along with the GitHub repo URL. If we want to get a little more fancy, we can actually focus on a specific branch name as well if we need to do that. So taking that, this project here, here's the URL for that. If I do,
Okay, so is this is this the workflow when you use Awesome AZD? Is you then come here and init from the repo?
exactly,
Okay, I
exactly. So
gotcha.
AZD init, and I'm going to go ahead and paste. Although I got to put
Okay.
the template flag in there first, right? And I'll have it. Let's find the.
Do they specify on their GitHub page like the template branch to use, or do you just kind of just say like, let me just leave off dash Branson?
Yeah. Mostly it is it's main, as
It's
you would
usually main.
expect,
Yeah. Okay.
right? But if let's say we're working on a trying out some new feature that might be on a sub branch, we could go ahead and select that and bring that down instead. So let me go ahead and do this init whack template paste. Cool. So now that project is going to come down onto my machine. New environment name, that's fine. We'll keep what it gave us there. And I could go ahead and do the same thing and do code insiders and open it up. And I got that project running here now. Now, I believe I can't run this one specifically. Yeah, because it's a Python one, but I could do because Docker's not running. If Docker was running, I could very easily jump into that dev container and make that run there.
Okay. Yeah. And
So it's that. Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's that easy to find something that matches what it is that you're working on from those awesome AZD templates. Bring that via the AZD init, and you're off and running.
You don't have Docker running, but I wonder, would you have been able to open that as a code space?
If I'd have forked this to, not here. Copy.
It doesn't fire up from Code Insiders. I don't remember. You might have to have a Code Spaces plugin installed. I don't know.
Let me see. It's dev container. Sorry. Control Shift P. Dev. Yeah, dev containers. Yeah, it's usually open folder in a container. It won't let you. I don't.
Start typing code spaces again, because there was an interesting option there that I don't know if this is going to work, but if you just did create new code space, I don't know if this is going to work. The problem is I don't know if it's going to care about the code that's in Visual Studio Code that you've got there right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like, nope, I just opened a code space and it's empty? Because that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking in my head, wouldn't it be cool that, yes, I brought this down, I used AZD to start it up. I don't have the prerequisites installed on my machine, whether that's local Python or local whatever, or, and even in your case, it's like the template author must be so frustrated because they're like, oh, you don't have the local prerequisites, but you also don't have Docker running. Like, man, I tried to bend over backwards for you, and you say that's okay. I'm opening up a code space, and that will get it done. So I don't know. Just a thought. I'm not saying it would work, but
Yeah. Let's
but
see.
and if it takes a while to spin up while we're doing some other stuff. What I'm wondering here is what I when I said create new code space in VS Code, I'm wondering if it's just going to do that and say like, yep, I created a code space. Oh, you wanted code in it too?
Right.
So how silly of you. But no,
Yeah.
there may be a like one click, one command way to do what I'm saying. It's just that I've put Rich on the spot, which is, you know,
Yeah. And usually when I do code spaces, I'll do it in the browser, and then I may come the other way and say, well, go ahead and launch this, connect to this code space from VS Code, which you can do. It's just I would have had it up and running beforehand. And it seems to be halting for some reason on when we say create new. Okay. We'll work on it for next time.
yeah.
Let's
Now, one other big thing, right, was
yeah.
making your own templates.
Yes. So there is there's a great documentation page out there that shows how to get started in doing your own template. I'm going to start with a couple of the first steps here. And given that we probably got about 10, maybe 15 minutes left, because I got to kind of end by 9 for a meeting,
Yep.
that let's just kind of see what we can get to. Because this, in my mind, this is kind of where, this is awesome, but I've got my project. What do I do? Or in this case, when we were looking at the AZD, awesome AZD site, there was no Blazor application. So maybe we can make a Blazor template and contribute it to the site here.
Yeah.
Now it's going to take a little bit of time because if you think of everything, well, you'll see why. We'll say we'll have to come back to finish it out, but we can at least get started. So if we do this, let's go back into, let's clear this up. I'm going to go ahead and back up one, MD. Yeah, that's fine. Just so I know where it is. Okay, so I'm just making a directory, and inside of this directory, I am going to do something we probably do all the time. I'm going to do .NET New.
I love the suggestions now. Whenever I watch anyone working these days, and now that we're in this world of I don't know what you call it, autocomplete thanks to AI.
Yeah,
I'm always so interested in what comes up in people's command lines now. You started typing .NET New, and it said, "Well, how about a Blazor server template?" And then you say like, "Yeah, okay, sure, why not?"
Yeah, because I've been doing a lot of Blazor server application. Just I'm trying to learn it, right? So I've been doing that new statement for a little bit, but then also having that folder, because -o is the folder where we're going to go put it in. So Blazor template -source, and if you think about it, if you go back to what we looked at earlier in that template application, that's where the code resided.
Yeah,
right? So we've
right.
got our little source file here where all the code is, and that's all we're doing. We want to make sure that it lands in the right spot from what's the word I'm looking for?
Just for your folder structure, right? I think
Yeah,
that more and more of the community, we've stopped doing what happens by default, which is just throw all the code in the root folder of your project, and it's kind of becomes, I don't want to call it standard. There may be some interesting standards out there if we look to some of our friends in other languages.
yeah,
But you typically see like a docs folder, a source folder, maybe a test folder, and people
yep,
set things up differently. But
Yeah.
I feel like that SRC has become more and more popular.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Convention. That's the word I was
Yeah.
looking
There
for.
you go. There you go. Yep.
So, and it's funny that IntelliSense probably came because I tried this out earlier to kind of see what this would look like. So
Right.
that Blazor template source folder is where we're going to put it. The name of the name that we're going to give our .NET project is Blazor project, just to keep
Okay.
it simple.
Cool.
Because it's just going to be
Right.
something that people would take and use. So we're doing that. I'm going to get a new template created. All right, I did it again. I put it in the wrong place.
Oh, you created the
Yeah, in
folder.
my root.
Yeah.
That'll be fun. I'll clean that up later. All right, so let's in this folder here. Let's do that. I've got my Blazor template, and I've got inside of here my source, and then inside of here my project. But it's set up for us to go ahead and do something interesting, which is inside of the Blazor template folder, which is just right now has my source file or my source folder. I'm going to go ahead and do an azd init command. And when I do that, it's going to say, hey, this isn't empty. Are you sure you want to do this? Because I'll write over everything if you want. And it won't. It'll respect the folder that's there. But I'm going to say, yes, we want to go ahead and initialize the project here. It also initializes a new Git repository, which we don't have yet. So I'm going to do that. And then it still wants a little bit of information around what it is I want to deploy. So yeah, you've got folders or files in there. I don't really understand what they are. And I understand you want to keep them and move around them, but do you want a template?
Yeah.
And in this
right.
case, we don't, because we're kind of
Right.
building our own.
We're going to build our own.
But we do want to have some starter pieces in there. And that's why we're going to choose for us a starter bicep. And we're going to do that. So it's initialized a Git repository. It's got our code. What name do you want to give it? That's fine. We'll leave it at that. And then we can go ahead and see that we've got that same structure that we had in there before and are able to essentially do what we essentially go down the same path a little differently. Because if I go ahead and open this in Code Insiders, and Code Insiders is just the preview version of, no, we don't want to open a container, preview version of Visual Studio Code. So it's, all the new features that are rolling into it. We get that same structure, but if we look at infrastructure here and we look at main bicep, let me get this out of the way. It has an environment, it has, an app service name, and it's just kind of putting those couple of pieces there. Not that it knows specifically that what my source code is, but that if you're pushing something to Azure, you're probably going to push some kind of an app service. So here's, let's at least put that piece in place for you. And it really doesn't instantiate it, although it gives me an app service name. The only thing it's instantiating is a resource group. So what this does is it gives us essentially a template to be able to, or a structure to start putting our own pieces in place. And I think what's also missing is those app API and web modules that we had in the other instance, right? So while we've got the structure to create an AZD template, we're going to have to do a bunch of work to get that in place so that when somebody goes and says AZD template Blazor app, they have the ability to very quickly do AZD up and move that into Azure. So we've got to put all that code in here as infrastructure as code.
Right. And so what's interesting is like what I'm getting here is that this could be sort of the what's next after file new project. Like for so long, we have left developers off at the side of the road on file new project, whether that was literally in Visual Studio as it was for decades or with .NET New. And then we go, here's some code. It runs locally. Goodbye. have a good one. And there's the reality is there's so much more. Where would I deploy this and how and what does that look like and what are the settings I should be really cognizant of? And so what our previous sample showed us is, well, you could deploy it in an app service. It doesn't have to be that way. You could build another one of these templates. And that's actually, I think, where it becomes really interesting and useful is same starter app, But this one deployed to app service. That one took advantage of Blazor WebAssembly and deployed to
Mhm.
static web apps.
Yeah.
This other one combined Blazor with some Azure functions and was essentially a 100% serverless application. And so, like, you could have this whole battery of templates that say,
Right.
"Listen, I'm showing you, like, sure, Blazor's involved, but I'm also showing you the next thing, which is how do you actually put this somewhere to start getting value, right?"
Yeah. Yeah, and those are good discussion points to have, and I think that's why it would be good to maybe start there on the next show and do
Yeah.
the infrastructure side of it and
So
how
our
we might
good
want to do
friend
it.
who maybe
Oh
heard his
wow.
ear, maybe he heard his ears, maybe his ears were burning when Greenish Pepper came in, and I recalled meeting him in Jeff Fritz's stream. Our good friend Jeff Fritz is here. Thanks for joining us. Um, so yeah, and so here's the final thought that I have here. Like, this is the first time that we've really dove deep into AZD, and I think one of the things we talked about on a previous Dev Talk show is I really began to enjoy the AZ experience, just the Azure CLI in Bash. And I started, it was funny. It was like going back in time, starting to not use the GUI tools as much as I tend to do, and even writing Bash scripts that'll automate some Azure deployment. But that is a different inflection point. That is a different tangent from I'm a developer. I want I want a new project
Yeah.
that it's also including deployment possibilities and options. I don't think anyone, including you, is trying to say that this is the easy button and your app is done, but it
Right.
is I'm going to show you some guideposts because the previous project had one of them was an API app service project, and then your web project, and then it was hooking up to Cosmos with the MongoDB interface. Cool.
Yeah.
um a series of Blazor templates could show different ways to deploy Blazor. But another interesting thing is depending on your enterprise and how big or small it is.
Hmm.
A lot of times architects, if let's say you're in architecture and you're tasked with deciding how the development teams are going to do something, how are they going to proceed, it is
Yeah.
so easy for all your different development teams to start diverging in different directions. And so the way that problem is often solved, unfortunately, and I don't think this works,
Yeah.
is you write a whole mess of SharePoint pages. Architecture guidance.
Yeah.
Start your new project and then do these things.
Yeah.
There is so much
Yeah.
that goes wrong there. Developer starts a new project, doesn't bother reading the SharePoint guidance. By the time the development team does start a new project, it's 2 versions of Visual Studio later, and all those screens and advice have moved and changed. So
Yeah.
that didn't work. And so what ends up happening is you're still at the same place where every team just sort of plods through and figures it out. And then the architect, and they got to be more empathetic here, is like, oh, nobody's paying attention to architecture. It's like, well, it's not easy. So
Right.
what if you as an organization invested in AZD templates that not they didn't just file a new project, they also might already have whether, because you saw there was support for Terraform too.
Yep.
The Terraform stuff, the Bicep stuff that already hooks into development infrastructure. Maybe your enterprise has a development Azure subscription. I don't know, or your team does, but it either already hooks it in or provides you the hooks just by changing a few of those environment variables.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like getting you on your way. It's already hooked up to maybe the corporate authentication system,
Yeah.
whatever it is you happen to use, so that you file new project. I have a new web application, and it already has authentication support because, oh my God, we talk about this on the show all the time. It is so easy to wait on that. And then it's a nightmare to be like, oh gosh, I got to integrate into the corporate auth solution so that our customers can use it.
Yeah.
But oops, wasn't doing that from the beginning. So what important hidden pages have I not locked down from step one?
Right.
So yeah, I would say to architecture teams, like, look at this as a way to deploy your preferred way of starting things, instead of relying on a bunch of knowledge base articles that frankly no one's going to read. They go stale.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. No, those
it,
are really cool things. And I think we chatted a little bit, recently around that template idea of a template project. And if you're using GitHub or GitHub Enterprise, you've got the ability to define that. So this has your, maybe it starts off with a Blazor app that's got your authentication and your the things you're mentioning around security are already kind of baked into into the project. And then potentially, I haven't tried this, but things like you would, I could do AZD init, point to that GitHub URL and bring that in. And now I've got, you know, the starter project and the structure that I can then start to, continue down the path that we have here to get it up into Azure.
yeah. There's a reason why infrastructure as code and things like that have become so popular, is that like slowly but surely
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to get rid of documentation as documentation, because it goes stale, it's hard to keep updated, it's hard to get right, it's
Yeah.
impossible to debug, because the only way to debug it is to go try it, and then what if things have changed, tools changed, upgrades, things change. So instead, infrastructure as code says like, wow, let me skip that step. If you want to know what it's doing, go look at the code. And in some respects, what I'm proposing here is almost a it's maybe this is what the AZD team is this is might have been the whole point of you bringing this up today, was it's file new project as code.
Yeah.
And a little bit more, that sounds funny, but it's more than just here's the code, I'm going to drive off. It's also maybe some basic connections to things that are important to your enterprise, your organization, your team, yourself as a hobbyist developer,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, so we looked at a lot of cool things. We looked at awesome AZD
Yeah.
and the AZD CLI, which I have installed, but I didn't do much more than I think one demo that we did several months ago on a longer evening talk show.
Yeah.
And but this was neat to see that you were very quickly able to bring up a new project, but also we added an environment, and then second, we've got bicep support built in there. We could have also gone with Terraform, go pull templates from the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably the most exciting thing is like add our own templates, right? Which I think
Exactly.
there's definitely a space there to do that. So
Yeah.
cool.
And based on some of the comments, sounds like there might be some interest there. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think if we can, there's two big pieces that are kind of looking ahead. There's the infrastructure piece and what we can do there around the bicep and making sure all the right components are in there. The second piece is the pipeline side of it, right? So we'll probably deploy this to GitHub, have a GitHub action in place that would basically be able to go ahead and call back into and do our CI/CD components. For completeness, we probably should do the ACDO as well, because it's still a project. There are lots of people still using it. So I think that's kind of, if we're looking ahead, those would
Yeah.
be some cool things to be worked that you'll see us working on over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool stuff. All right. Well, hey, we had uh, a lot of awesome friends join us today. Saduki also wanted to point out the Blazor Pizza Workshop. Super awesome. It was a
Nice.
big part of the web workshop. I wish I had the link available. I just don't have it top of mind. But the web workshop on C# Fritz's stream, which he was waving to Saduki a little bit earlier, you must go follow both of these folks. And it's not
Yeah.
just on Twitch, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, because you will learn so much from both of them. And again, that web workshop that we did chat about for just a little bit was so cool. I should have grabbed the link to make it available. Maybe I'll see if I can get it into this YouTube video at the last second here. But we are hitting close to 9 o'clock, and this is one of our sort of brand new Dev Talk Show morning coffee hours. We can sneak it in and get focused on one quick topic.
Yeah.
And then and for me, it's run to stand up. And I wouldn't be surprised for a lot of you, it might be time for stand up as well. So
There you go.
all right. So pre-stand up morning coffee done. Everybody, we are here in summer, a few days in. Just to let you know, I thought about this. My daughter had a hockey game last night. We left the hockey rink at 8:30. walk outside. The sun hasn't gone down yet, so it is definitely summer. And how strange it is to leave a hockey rink and the sun is still out, but that's how it goes. So, in any case, everybody have a great day. Really thank you for joining us.
Thank
We
you.
don't have a regular schedule for this, but is there still a chance of doing one tomorrow morning?
More so than there was probably a couple hours ago. Yeah, yeah. If you want to do one tomorrow morning, we'll
Okay.
certainly do that.
I think that's the last day this week that we can get
Yeah.
together. So tomorrow morning is the plan. We try to get on by 7:30, and if you can make it, great. And if not, no matter what happens, have a great day, and we'll see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.